The ammonia fumes burned my nostrils as I scrubbed the marble floor of the third-floor hallway, my knees aching against the hard surface despite the thin padding I'd fashioned from an old towel. Each circular motion of my arm sent a dull throb through my shoulder, a reminder that I'd been at this for nearly 6 hours without a proper break. The mansion loomed around me, silent except for the occasional creak of old wood settling and the distant hum of something mechanical in the walls. I pressed the back of my wrist against my forehead, trying to wipe away the sweat without contaminating my already raw hands with the cleaning solution. The gesture made my vision swim slightly, dark spots dancing at the edges. I blinked them away, forcing myself to focus on the smudge I'd been working on for the past 10 minutes. It was probably just a shadow, my exhausted brain interpreting the natural variation in the marble as dirt that needed removing. When was the last time I'd eaten? Breakfast had been half a granola bar at 5 a.m, before catching 2 buses to reach this isolated estate in upstate New York. Mrs. Chen, the agency coordinator, had emphasized how important this client was, how much he valued privacy and perfection. The pay was triple my usual rate, enough to cover 2 months of my mother's medication, if I could just make it through this initial deep clean without collapsing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Probably another message from the hospital billing department. They'd been calling daily since Mom's latest admission 3 weeks ago. The number on the latest invoice had made me physically ill when I'd opened it. 5 digits that might as well have been 5 million for all my ability to pay it. The bucket of cleaning solution beside me had gone cold, the water murky with dissolved grime. I should empty it, refill it with fresh hot water, and the precisely measured amount of cleaner Mrs. Chen had specified in her 14-page instruction document. But the thought of standing up, of walking all the way back down 3 flights of stairs to the service area, made my legs feel like lead. Just finish this section, I told myself. Just get to the end of the hallway. Then you can take a break. The mansion was unlike anything I'd encountered in my 2 years of professional cleaning. Most of my clients were wealthy, sure, but their homes had a lived-in quality. Family photos on the walls, stacks of mail on counters, shoes kicked off by the door. This place felt more like a museum. Every surface gleamed with a perfection that suggested either rarely used or meticulously maintained by an invisible army of staff. Except there was no staff. Mrs. Chen had been clear about that. The owner preferred complete privacy. I was to arrive before dawn, work until the job was complete, and leave before he returned from wherever he spent his days. I wouldn't see him, wouldn't speak to him, wouldn't even know what he looked like beyond the vague description of tall, dark-haired, intimidating that Mrs. Chen had provided with an odd, nervous laugh. The house itself provided few clues about its occupant. The furniture was expensive, but impersonal, all straight lines and neutral colors. No books left open on tables, no dishes in the sink, no evidence of hobbies or interests, just rooms upon rooms of beautiful empty space. Well, not entirely empty. I'd found the study on the 2nd floor, and that had been different. While still immaculate, it had the only personal touches I'd seen all day. A chess set made of what looked like jade and obsidian, positioned mid-game on a side table. A single photograph in a silver frame on the massive mahogany desk, turned away from me so I couldn't see the image. And books. Actual books with cracked spines suggesting they'd been read, filling floor-to-ceiling shelves along one wall. I'd spent extra time in that room, dusting each book spine carefully, resisting the urge to pull any out and peek inside. The titles were eclectic. Russian literature, philosophy, military strategy, art history. Not what I'd expected from someone who lived in such stark surroundings. My vision swam again, more pronounced this time. I gripped the edge of a nearby console table, waiting for the dizziness to pass. The face that looked back at me from the ornate mirror above the table was pale, dark circles prominent beneath green eyes that seemed too large in my thin face. My brown hair, pulled back in a practical bun, had come partly loose, strands sticking to my sweaty neck. I looked exactly like what I was. Exhausted, underfed, desperate. The phone buzzed again. This time I pulled it out, thinking it might be Mom's nurse with an update. Instead, it was a text from my roommate Jenna. Hospital called again. Said they need to talk to you about payment arrangements. Also, your mom is asking for you. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I hadn't visited in 3 days, too busy working double shifts to keep up with the mounting bills. Mom understood, or at least she said she did, but I could see the hurt in her eyes each time I had to cut a visit short or skip one entirely. My fingers fumbled as I tried to type a response, the letters blurring together. I blinked hard, but the screen remained stubbornly out of focus. Maybe I should take that break now. Just 5 minutes to drink some water, eat the other half of that granola bar I'd saved for lunch. I pushed myself up from my knees, and the world tilted violently sideways. My last coherent thought before darkness swallowed me was that I couldn't afford to lose this job. I came back to consciousness in stages, each sense returning separately in a disorienting cascade. First, sound. Low voices speaking in tones too quiet for me to make out words. Then touch. Something soft beneath me, much softer than the marble floor where I'd been kneeling. The chemical smell of cleaning products had been replaced by something else, something warm and masculine like cedar and smoke. My eyes felt incredibly heavy, but I forced them open to find myself staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. Not the ornate plasterwork of the mansion's hallways, but a simpler surface painted a warm cream color. I turned my head slightly, wincing at the stiffness in my neck, and realized I was lying on a leather sofa in what appeared to be an office. No, not just any office. The office. The study on the second floor with the chess set and the mysterious photograph. She's waking up. The voice was male, unfamiliar, speaking with a crisp British accent. Vitals are stable, but she's severely dehydrated and malnourished. When did you say she last ate? I don't know. This voice made something in my chest constrict with instinctive alarm. It was deep, controlled, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. Russian, maybe? Each word was precisely articulated, giving the impression of someone who weighed every syllable before speaking. I found her unconscious in the hallway 30 minutes ago. Well, she needs food and fluids immediately. And rest, proper rest, not whatever she's been doing to herself. Papers rustled. Her blood pressure is dangerously low. If you'd found her even an hour later. But I didn't. The second voice, the one that made my instincts scream danger, cut in smoothly. What does she need? I've started an IV for the immediate dehydration. She should stay horizontal for at least another hour, then small amounts of food, nothing too rich or it'll come right back up. Someone should monitor her for the next 24 hours to ensure there are no complications. Panic cut through my lingering fog. 24 hours? I couldn't stay here that long. I had another job tonight, cleaning an office building downtown. And I needed to visit Mom. Needed to call the hospital billing department. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun violently. A hand, large and warm, pressed gently but firmly against my shoulder, keeping me down. Don't move. The dangerous voice was closer now, and when my vision cleared enough to focus, I found myself looking into the most intense gray eyes I'd ever seen. The man kneeling beside the sofa was perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw with a hint of stubble, and those eyes, like polished steel, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with what looked like old scars, and expensive-looking charcoal slacks. This was the owner. Had to be. The one who valued privacy so much that I was supposed to be invisible. I'm sorry, I managed, my voice coming out as a hoarse whisper. I'll finish the hallway. I just need a minute. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. The hallway can wait. But Mrs. Chen said... Mrs. Chen doesn't dictate anything in this house. His tone wasn't harsh, but it carried absolute authority. You collapsed from exhaustion. You're in no condition to work. The other man, who I could now see was elderly with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, patted my other arm gently. Listen to him, my dear. You've pushed yourself far beyond what's healthy. Your body simply shut down. Tears pricked at my eyes. The product of exhaustion and frustration, and the crushing weight of everything that had led me to this moment. I can't lose this job. I can't. My mother, she's sick, and the medical bills. My voice cracked, and I bit down hard on my lower lip to stop the words from spilling out. The gray-eyed man studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he glanced at the elderly man. Thank you, Dr. Morrison. I'll take it from here. Are you certain? The girl needs... I'll ensure she has everything she needs. There was a finality to the words that made it clear the discussion was over. Dr. Morrison gathered his bag with a slightly disapproving sniff but headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned back to me. Small sips of water first, then clear broth if you can keep that down. And for God's sake, don't try to stand for at least an hour. Then he was gone, and I was alone with the dangerous-eyed man who was still kneeling beside the sofa, as if it was the most natural thing in the world for someone like him to lower himself to attend to someone like me. What's your name? He asked. Rowan. Rowan Finch. Rowan. He repeated it slowly, as if testing how it sounded. I'm Caspian Vale. This is my home, and you're not losing any job. What you're going to do is rest. I wanted to argue, to insist that I was fine, that I could get back to work. But my body betrayed me, a wave of exhaustion so profound rolling over me that I could barely keep my eyes open. The hallway. I tried one more time, weakly. Will still be there tomorrow. His hand, which had remained on my shoulder, moved to adjust the blanket someone had draped over me. The gesture was surprisingly gentle for someone who radiated such controlled danger. Right now, the only thing you need to worry about is resting. As consciousness began to slip away again, I heard him speaking in a low voice to someone I couldn't see. Cancel the meet at the docks. Tell Victor to handle the Brooklyn situation without me. I'm not leaving tonight. The words meant nothing to my fading awareness, just sounds that blurred together as I fell back into darkness. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice noted that something significant had just happened, that the man kneeling beside me had just made a decision that would change everything. I just had no idea how much. I woke to soft lamplight and the sound of rain against windows. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was, only that the surface beneath me was far more comfortable than my own bed at the apartment I shared with Jenna. Then memory returned in a rush. The hallway, the dizziness, the collapse, the gray-eyed man, Caspian Vale. I was still in his study, still on the leather sofa, though someone had added more pillows behind my head and a second blanket over the first. The IV line the doctor had mentioned was taped to my left arm, leading up to a bag hanging from a portable stand beside the sofa. A glance at my phone, which someone had thoughtfully placed on the coffee table within reach, showed it was past 10 at night. I'd been unconscious for hours. Panic fluttered in my chest until I noticed the text from Jenna. Got your message. Don't worry about anything. Your mom is doing fine. Focus on getting better. Message? I didn't remember sending any message. You're awake. Good. The voice came from across the room, and I turned my head to find Caspian sitting behind the massive desk, a laptop open in front of him and papers scattered across the polished surface. He'd added a black vest over his white shirt, and in the warm glow of the desk lamp, he looked like something out of another era. Powerful, refined, dangerous. "I didn't send Jenna a message," I said, my voice still rough but stronger than before. "I did, from your phone." He stood, moving around the desk with the fluid grace of someone utterly comfortable in his own space. "You were in no condition to handle logistics, so I handled them for you. I also spoke with Mrs. Chen and informed her that you'd be unavailable for your other jobs for the next few days." My heart sank. "But I need those jobs. I can't afford—" "You'll be compensated for the time," he interrupted, crossing to where I lay and crouching down so we were eye level. This close, I could see flecks of silver in his gray irises and a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Triple your usual rate for each day you rest and recover. Non-negotiable." "I don't understand. Why would you do that?" His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in those steel eyes. "Because you collapsed in my home, and that makes you my responsibility until you're well enough to leave." There was something in the way he said it, a weight to the words that suggested he took that responsibility very seriously. But there was also something else, something unspoken that made the hair on the back of my neck prickle with awareness. "I can't accept your money," I said, trying to sit up despite the doctor's orders. "That's not right." His hand came to rest on my shoulder again, the now familiar gentle pressure keeping me down. "What isn't right is that you've been starving yourself to pay medical bills. When did you last have a full meal?" The question caught me off guard. I tried to think back through the blur of the past weeks. "I eat," I said defensively. "That's not what I asked." His gaze was penetrating, seeing far more than I wanted to reveal. "When did you last sit down and eat a complete meal without worrying about the cost?" I looked away, unable to hold his stare. The answer was before Mom got sick, before the bills started piling up, before every dollar became a calculation of survival. But I wasn't about to admit that to this man who probably spent more on a single dinner than I earned in a week. Exactly what I thought. He stood, and I heard him moving across the room. A door opened, and he spoke to someone in the hallway in a low voice I couldn't quite make out. When he returned, he was carrying a tray with a bowl of something that smelled incredible, steam rising in delicate curls. "Chicken broth," he said, setting the tray on the coffee table and adjusting it so it was within my reach. "Dr. Morrison said to start simple. Can you sit up if I help you?" I wanted to refuse, to insist I could manage on my own, but my arms were trembling from the effort of even considering it. Wordlessly, I nodded. Caspian moved behind the sofa, and with surprising gentleness for someone so clearly dangerous, he helped me into a sitting position, adjusting the pillows to support my back. His hands were warm through the fabric of my work shirt, and I caught another whiff of that cedar and smoke scent that seemed to cling to him. "Thank you," I managed, accepting the bowl he handed me. The first sip of broth was like heaven, warm and rich with a depth of flavor that suggested hours of careful preparation. I took another sip, then another, my body practically weeping with relief at finally receiving sustenance. Caspian settled into the leather armchair across from me, watching with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable. But there was nothing predatory in his gaze, just a kind of focused attention that suggested he was cataloging every detail, every reaction. "Your mother," he said after a moment. "What's her condition?" The question surprised me enough that I nearly choked on my broth. "How did you—" "You mentioned medical bills when you woke up earlier, and your roommate's text mentioned your mother specifically." He leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. "I'm assuming her treatment is the reason you're working yourself to death." There was no judgment in his tone, just clinical assessment. But something about his directness made it impossible to hide behind polite evasions. Stage 3 kidney disease, I heard myself say. She needs dialysis 3 times a week, and the insurance company is fighting coverage for the medications that actually help. Every month it's something else, some other bill that's not covered, some other procedure they deem unnecessary. The words came faster now, spilling out with a bitterness I hadn't realized I was holding. I've tried everything. Medical assistance programs, charity care applications, negotiating with billing departments. Nothing is ever enough. Caspian was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he asked, "How much do you owe currently?" I can't ask you for money." "You didn't ask. I'm offering." He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened what looked like a banking app. "How much?" The number burned on my tongue, too large to even speak aloud. 84,000, I whispered. Give or take a few thousand depending on what new bills arrive. I expected shock or pity, or the kind of uncomfortable throat clearing that people did when confronted with someone else's financial disaster. Instead, Caspian just nodded, his fingers moving across his phone screen. "What hospital?" "You can't, this isn't..." I struggled to find words. "You don't even know me. Why would you pay off a stranger's medical debt?" He looked up from his phone, and for the first time I saw something almost like a smile touch the corners of his mouth. It didn't quite reach his eyes, but it softened the hard planes of his face. "Let's just say I have more money than I know what to do with, and you need help that I'm capable of providing. Consider it an investment in your recovery. You can't heal properly while drowning in stress. But $80,000 is a rounding error in my monthly expenses." He returned his attention to his phone. "St. Vincent's Hospital, correct? That's what the area code on your roommate's phone suggests." I nodded numbly, unable to process what was happening. This man, this stranger, was talking about my crushing debt like it was pocket change. "Done," he said a moment later, setting his phone aside. "They'll have the payment by morning. Your mother's treatment can continue without interruption." The bowl of broth slipped from my nerveless fingers. Caspian caught it with reflexes that seemed too fast for someone sitting several feet away, setting it safely on the coffee table before returning his attention to me. "Why?" I managed, tears streaming down my face now. "Why would you do that?" For a long moment he didn't answer, just studied me with those penetrating gray eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd heard it yet. "Because I can. And because watching you destroy yourself over circumstances beyond your control doesn't sit well with me." "But you don't know anything about me," I protested weakly. "I could be a terrible person. I could take your money and disappear. You collapsed while working because you were too focused on doing the job perfectly to take care of yourself. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." He leaned forward slightly. "And for the record, I have very effective methods of finding people who try to run from me. Not that I think you will." There was something in the way he said it, a casual certainty about his reach and capabilities that sent a chill down my spine. What kind of man could casually write off such a massive sum? What kind of business did he run that made that kind of money seem insignificant? I thought about the isolated location of the mansion, the obsessive privacy, the way Dr. Morrison had appeared with unusual speed when summoned. Caspian Vale wasn't just wealthy. He was something else. Something that existed in the shadows of legitimate society. "What do you do?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "For a living, I mean." His expression shuddered immediately, the brief softness vanishing behind a mask of cool control. "I handle acquisitions for various interested parties. Import, export, that sort of thing." It was a non-answer. the kind of vague deflection that revealed nothing while sounding plausible. But I was too exhausted and overwhelmed to push further. This man had just saved my mother's life, had removed the crushing weight that had been drowning me for months. Whatever he did, whatever questionable business he ran, it had resulted in a miracle I couldn't possibly repay. "Thank you," I whispered, inadequate though the words were. "I don't know how I'll ever—" "You'll recover," he interrupted gently. "That's how you'll repay me. You'll rest, eat properly, and rebuild your strength. And then, if you're willing, you can continue working for me at a rate that won't require you to take other jobs." I stared at him. "You want to hire me permanently?" "This house is too large for one person to maintain, and I prefer not to have strangers coming and going constantly. You've already proven yourself trustworthy, and your attention to detail is exceptional." He gestured around the study. "Besides, I find I prefer your presence to the alternative of continued solitude." It was the most personal thing he'd said yet, a glimpse beneath the carefully controlled exterior. And something about the way he said it, with a hint of vulnerability quickly concealed, made my chest ache. "I don't understand you at all," I admitted. This time, his smile was genuine, transforming his face into something almost beautiful. "Good. That's exactly how I prefer it." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, and his expression went cold and hard again. "I need to take this. Don't try to get up. Someone will be here shortly with more food." He strode from the room, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone as he answered, "I told you not to call unless it was an emergency." The door closed behind him, leaving me alone with my spinning thoughts. Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming against the windows with increasing force. I looked down at the IV still dripping fluid into my arm, at the expensive blankets covering me, at the bowl of perfect broth waiting on the table. 6 hours ago, I'd been scrubbing floors while starving and desperate. Now I was lying in a room that probably cost more to furnish than I'd earn in 5 years. My mother's medical debts paid off by a man who had taken one look at my collapse and decided to insert himself into my life with overwhelming force. I should have been more wary, more suspicious. Instead, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself in months. Hope. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Holy shit, Ro. The hospital called. Someone paid off everything. Was that your new employer? What is happening?" I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What could I possibly say? I didn't understand what was happening any better than she did. All I knew was that Caspian Vale had appeared in my life like some dark guardian angel, and nothing would ever be the same. "I don't know," I finally typed back. "But I'm safe. I'll explain more tomorrow." Through the study door, I could hear Caspian's voice, still on his call. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable, cold, commanding, threatening. This was someone used to being obeyed, someone who didn't accept anything less than absolute compliance. And yet he'd knelt beside me, had adjusted my blankets with gentle hands, had paid off a debt that would have crushed me without even blinking. What kind of man was Caspian Vale? And what had I just gotten myself into? The next morning, I woke in an actual bedroom. Disorientation came first. The unfamiliar sensation of soft sheets against my skin and sunlight streaming through windows I didn't recognize. For a moment, panic seized me. Had I been moved while unconscious again? But then memory returned. Caspian carrying me from the study sometime after midnight, his arms strong and steady as he navigated the hallways, murmuring something about proper rest, requiring a proper bed. I'd been too exhausted to protest, too wrung out from emotional upheaval to do anything but allow myself to be tucked into what was clearly a guest room. The space was decorated in warm neutrals, less austere than the rest of the mansion, with touches that suggested feminine input. A vase of fresh flowers on the dresser, gauzy curtains filtering the morning light, a plush armchair positioned near the window with a reading lamp beside it. The IV had been removed at some point, a small bandage covering the needle site on my inner elbow. Someone had also changed me into soft cotton pajamas that definitely weren't mine, which brought a flush of embarrassment to my cheeks. Had Caspian? No. He must have staff after all, hidden away like everything else in this place. A soft knock on the door made me sit up, pulling the blankets higher despite being fully clothed. "Come in," I called, my voice still rough with sleep. The woman who entered was perhaps in her 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a neat bun and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She carried a tray laden with more food than I could possibly eat. Scrambled eggs, toast with butter and jam, fresh fruit, a pot of tea, and what looked like homemade pastries. "Good morning, Miss Finch," she said, her voice carrying a slight Eastern European accent. "I'm Elena. I oversee the household staff when Mr. Vale requires it. He asked me to check on you this morning and ensure you ate properly." "There's staff?" I blurted, then immediately felt foolish. Of course there was staff. No one maintained a mansion like this alone. Elena's smile widened as she set the tray across my lap, adjusting it carefully. "A small team, very discreet. We come and go through the service entrances, usually when Mr. Vale is away or confined to his offices. He values his privacy, as you've probably gathered." "He paid off my mother's medical bills," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. $84,000 just like that. Something flickered across Elena's face, a mix of emotions I couldn't quite parse. "Mr. Vale is generous with those who earn his respect, and protective of those under his care. Eat, dear. You need to rebuild your strength." She moved around the room with practiced efficiency, opening curtains wider and straightening already perfect pillows on the armchair. But there was something deliberate about her movements, like she was giving me time to process while remaining available for questions. "What exactly does Mr. Vale do?" I asked, picking at the eggs even as my stomach growled its approval. "He said something about acquisitions, but that doesn't explain." I gestured vaguely, encompassing the mansion, the casual spending of huge sums, the aura of carefully controlled danger. Elena paused in her tidying, her back to me. When she turned, her expression was carefully neutral. "Mr. Vale handles delicate business matters for influential clients. It requires discretion, connections, and certain skills that not everyone possesses. Beyond that, it's not my place to say." "But it's dangerous," I pressed. "Last night, he was on the phone, and the way he sounded—" "All business involves risk," Elena interrupted gently but firmly. "And Mr. Vale is very good at managing those risks. What you should focus on, Miss Finch, is that he's chosen to extend his protection to you. That's not something he does lightly or often. Protection." The word sent a chill down my spine, because it implied I needed protecting from something, or someone. As if reading my thoughts, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her expression becoming more serious. "The world Mr. Vale operates in is complicated, but what you need to understand is that his word is absolute within his sphere of influence. If he says you're under his protection, that means you're safer here than you would be anywhere else. Do you understand?" I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded anyway. Elena seemed satisfied, rising and heading for the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back with an expression that might have been sympathy or warning. "He canceled important business last night to stay with you. That's never happened before, not in all the years I've known him. Whatever his reasons, he's invested in your well-being now. Don't take that lightly." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with breakfast and 1,000 unanswered questions. I spent most of the day in the guest room, alternating between sleeping and eating the meals Elena brought at regular intervals. By late afternoon, I felt almost human again, the fog of exhaustion finally lifting enough to think clearly. My phone had been charging on the nightstand, and I finally had the energy to deal with the accumulation of messages. Jenna had sent a dozen texts, progressing from concerned to frantic to relieved, after I'd finally responded with more details. The hospital had called twice to confirm the payment and adjust Mom's care plan now that financial concerns were no longer a factor, and Mrs. Chen from the cleaning agency had left a voicemail so flustered and apologetic that I had to listen to it twice to understand her. Miss Finch, I am so sorry about the unfortunate incident. Mr. Vale has explained everything, and of course we understand you'll need time to recover. Your other clients have been reassigned, and we've noted that you'll be working exclusively for Mr. Vale going forward. He's been most generous with his compensation arrangements. Please, please, take care of yourself. And again, my deepest apologies. Working exclusively for Mr. Vale. The phrase should have worried me more than it did. Instead, I felt a strange sort of relief. No more juggling multiple jobs. No more racing between locations on public transit. No more calculating every dollar against survival. But at what cost? What did Caspian Vale actually want from me? As if summoned by my thoughts, another knock came at the door. This time, when I called permission to enter, it was Caspian himself who appeared. He'd changed from last night's formal attire into dark jeans and a black sweater that did nothing to diminish his imposing presence. If anything, the casual clothes made him seem more dangerous, less constrained by social expectations. You look better, he observed, crossing to the armchair and settling into it with casual grace. Elena says you've been eating properly. She's very persistent, I said, which earned me a slight smile. She is that. How are you feeling? Confused mostly, and grateful, but mostly confused. I pulled my knees up to my chest under the blankets, wrapping my arms around them. You paid off a massive debt, offered me a permanent job, and basically took over my life in the space of 12 hours. I don't understand why. Caspian was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying me with that now familiar intensity. When he spoke, his voice was carefully measured. I told you last night that you became my responsibility when you collapsed in my home. I meant it. But that's not a normal response, I countered. Normal people would have called an ambulance, maybe paid for the emergency room visit. They don't erase someone's entire debt and offer them employment. I'm not normal people, he said simply. And I don't do anything I don't want to do, Rowan, including this. The way he said my name, with careful deliberation, made something flutter in my chest. I pushed the feeling away, focusing on the larger questions. Elena said you canceled something important last night, some meeting. His expression darkened slightly. I did. Why? Because you were unconscious and vulnerable in my home, and I don't delegate responsibility when something matters to me. But I'm a stranger, I protested. I was just someone hired to clean your floors. Why would I matter? For a long moment, he didn't answer, just watched me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze never leaving mine. When I was 14, my mother collapsed in the street. She'd been working 3 jobs to keep food on the table after my father died. No one stopped to help her. They walked around her body like she was trash, like her suffering was inconvenient to their day. His voice remained controlled, but something cold and hard underlay the words. She lay there for 40 minutes before someone finally called an ambulance. By then, she'd had a stroke. She never fully recovered. The revelation hung in the air between us, explaining so much and yet raising new questions. I'm sorry, I said quietly. That must have been... It taught me several things, he interrupted, his tone brooking no sympathy. First, that the world is full of people who will walk past suffering if it doesn't directly affect them. Second, that money equals power, and power equals the ability to ensure certain things never happen again. And third, that when I see someone vulnerable and in need, I don't walk past. But you do more than not walk past, I pointed out. You insert yourself completely. You take control. Yes. No apology, no justification, just acknowledgement. That should terrify me more than it does, I admitted. Should it? His head tilted slightly, a predator assessing prey. Are you afraid of me, Rowan? I considered the question honestly. Was I afraid? He was clearly dangerous, clearly operated outside normal social boundaries, clearly used to exerting control over people and situations. But when I thought about the gentle way he'd adjusted my blankets, the unexpected vulnerability in his voice when he'd spoken about his mother, the simple fact that he'd stayed rather than delegating to staff. No, I said finally. I'm not afraid of you. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. Most people are. I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're not. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I didn't have the energy to examine. Finally, Caspian stood, breaking the tension. Rest for the remainder of today. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, I'll show you around the house properly. Help you understand the full scope of the position I'm offering. Position, I repeated. As in cleaning? As in managing the household. Elena handles the staff, but I'd like someone here permanently. Someone I trust. He moved toward the door, then paused. The previous arrangement was temporary. Rotating staff who never knew anything about my life or my business. I'm proposing something different. Something permanent. You don't know me well enough to trust me, I protested. He looked back, and his slight smile held shadows. I know you'd rather destroy yourself than accept help you haven't earned. I know you prioritize others' well-being over your own. I know you notice details that most people miss. And I know that when you gave your word to Mrs. Chen that you'd do the job perfectly, you nearly killed yourself trying to keep that promise. That's everything I need to know about your character. Before I could respond, he was gone, the door closing with a soft click behind him. I sat in the dimming light, processing everything he'd revealed. Caspian Vale wasn't just wealthy and dangerous. He was damaged, shaped by a childhood trauma that had set him on whatever dark path he now walked. And for reasons I couldn't fully understand, he decided I was worth protecting, worth investing in, worth bringing into whatever complicated world he inhabited. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Your mom is doing amazing. They changed her medication and treatment plan. She's already looking better. What the hell happened, Ro? I stared at the message, tears blurring my vision. What had happened? A miracle. A terrifying, inexplicable miracle delivered by a man who terrified and intrigued me in equal measure. I don't know, I typed back, but I think my life just changed completely. Outside, evening was falling, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in the mansion, Caspian Vale was probably in his study, making phone calls and handling whatever dark business required his attention. The meeting he'd canceled last night, what had that cost him? What had he sacrificed for a stranger who'd collapsed in his hallway? And why did the thought of him staying to watch over me make my chest feel warm and tight and terrified all at once? I pulled the blankets higher, suddenly cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. Tomorrow, I'd ask more questions. Tomorrow, I'd push for real answers about what he did, what he expected, what this permanent position actually meant. But tonight, I let myself feel safe for the first time in months, because whatever else Caspian Vale might be, he'd proven one thing beyond doubt. When he said someone was under his protection, he meant it absolutely. Even if I didn't fully understand why I needed protecting yet. The next morning, I woke to find clothes laid out on the armchair. Not my work uniform, but soft, expensive-looking pieces in my size. Dark jeans, a cream cashmere sweater, undergarments still in their packaging. Everything fit perfectly, which should have been more unsettling than it was. Elena appeared with breakfast as I was examining the tags. "Mr. Vale had these sent over early this morning," she explained, setting down a tray of fresh pastries and coffee. "He thought you might appreciate something more comfortable than your work clothes." "He seems to think of everything," I said, unable to keep a note of bewilderment from my voice. Elena's smile was knowing. "He's very thorough when he decides something matters." After she left, I showered in the attached bathroom, all marble and chrome, with water pressure that felt like luxury itself, and dressed in the new clothes. They felt like armor somehow, transforming me from desperate cleaning woman into someone who might actually belong in a place like this. Caspian found me in the hallway outside my room, clearly having been waiting for me. He'd dressed formally today in charcoal slacks and a white dress shirt with the first few buttons undone, revealing a glimpse of his collarbone. The casual intimacy of it made my breath catch. "Ready for the tour?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." He led me through the mansion with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of his domain. The house was even larger than I'd realized, with wings I hadn't explored during my cleaning. He showed me the main living areas first, formal sitting rooms, a dining room that could seat 20, a library that made my heart ache with longing. "You're welcome to any of the books," he said, noticing my expression. "I rarely use this room anymore, but I can't bring myself to part with them." "Your mother's?" I guessed, thinking of what he'd shared yesterday. Something flickered across his face. "Some of them. Others I've collected over the years. Knowledge is power, Rowan. Never forget that." The kitchen was enormous, professional grade with gleaming stainless steel and more gadgets than I could identify. "Elena's domain," Caspian explained, "though I occasionally cook when the mood strikes." "You cook?" A slight smile. "I'm full of surprises." He showed me the gym, the wine cellar, the indoor pool I hadn't known existed. Each space was maintained to perfection, clearly reflecting serious money and attention to detail. But it was when we reached the lower level that things changed. "This section is restricted," Caspian said, stopping before a heavy door with an electronic keypad. "My private offices. You'll have access when you're ready, but for now, it's important you understand that what happens behind this door stays completely confidential." "What exactly happens behind that door?" I asked. He studied me for a long moment. "Business that requires absolute discretion, meetings with clients who value privacy, communications that can't be intercepted or overheard. Nothing that will ever put you in danger, but nothing that should be discussed outside these walls either." It was the most direct he'd been about the nature of his work, and it confirmed what I'd already suspected. Caspian Vale operated in shadows, handling matters that couldn't bear scrutiny. "And you want me living here, knowing that's happening? I want you living here because you're trustworthy, because you notice things others miss, and because—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Because I prefer your presence to the alternative." That phrase again. I preferred your presence, as if my being here served some purpose beyond household management. "What happened with the meeting you canceled?" I asked abruptly. "The one from the first night?" Caspian's expression shuddered. "That's not your concern. But it cost you something. Elena said you never cancel important business." Elena talks too much. But there was no real anger in his voice. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "There was a situation that required my immediate attention. A territorial dispute with a rival organization. My absence allowed them to make moves that complicated matters." "Territorial dispute," I repeated. "Like organized crime?" He turned to face me fully, his gray eyes penetrating, like business interests that occasionally conflict. "Nothing you need to worry about, Rowan. That world doesn't touch you." "Except it does, doesn't it?" Because you're in it, and you're asking me to live here, to work for you, to... I gestured helplessly. To be part of whatever this is. You'll be protected, he said firmly. That's non-negotiable. Nothing will harm you while you're under my roof. But why? I pressed. Why do I need protection? Why am I worth this much attention from someone like you? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Just studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Then he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and smoke, close enough to see the faint scar through his eyebrow up close. Because when I found you collapsed in my hallway, something shifted, he said quietly. I've walked past suffering before, ignored problems that weren't mine to solve. But with you... He paused, seeming to search for words. I couldn't. And I won't. You're mine to protect now. Accept it. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through my chest, dangerous and intoxicating. I don't understand you, I whispered. You will. He stepped back, the moment breaking. Come. There's one more thing I need to show you. He led me back upstairs to a room I hadn't seen before, unlocking it with a key from his pocket. Inside was an office, smaller than his study but beautifully appointed. A desk faced windows overlooking the grounds, and shelves lined with organizational supplies and what looked like household management software. This would be your space, Caspian explained, for managing staff schedules, household accounts, inventory. Elena can train you on the systems we use. You're really serious about this, I said, taking in the setup. The permanent position. I don't do things halfway. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me explore. The salary is 6 figures annually, plus room and board, health insurance, and a discretionary budget for anything you need. Your mother's ongoing medical care will be covered as well. The numbers made my head spin. That's insane. You're paying me more than most executives make. You're managing my private life. That requires absolute trust and discretion, which are worth more than any executive contributes. He crossed his arms. Plus, I'm ensuring you never have to choose between your well-being and financial survival again. Tears pricked at my eyes. I don't deserve this. Stop saying that. His voice was sharp now, cutting. You nearly killed yourself trying to save your mother. You worked until you collapsed rather than fail at a job. You have integrity that most people abandoned years ago. You deserve far more than I'm offering. I turned to look at him, this dangerous man who'd inserted himself into my life with overwhelming force. What do you get out of this? Really? Something vulnerable crossed his face, quickly concealed. Peace. Knowing someone I trust is managing the one space that's supposed to be safe. And... He hesitated. Company. This house has been empty too long. The admission cost him something. I could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the careful control of his expression. Caspian Vale, who clearly terrified half the city, was lonely. I'll do it, I heard myself say. The position. I'll accept. Relief flashed across his face so quickly I might have imagined it. Good. We'll draw up formal paperwork today. Elena can help you move your belongings from your apartment this week. There isn't much to move, I admitted. Most of my stuff was sold to cover bills. Then we'll get you new things. Make a list of what you need. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Jenna, asking when I'd be home to explain everything. I looked at the message, then at Caspian, then at the office that was apparently mine now. This is really happening, I said. Yes. He pushed off from the doorframe. I have business to attend to this afternoon. Elena will help you settle in. Tomorrow we'll start properly. He turned to leave, but I called after him. Caspian? He paused, looking back. Thank you. For all of it. I know I keep saying that, but... You don't need to thank me, Rowan. Just stay. His gaze held mine. That's all I ask. Stay." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my new office, in my new life, trying to process how completely everything had changed in less than 48 hours. The rest of the day passed in a blur of practicalities. Elena helped me draft a list of necessities and arranged for a shopping service to deliver everything by the next day. I called Jenna and attempted to explain the inexplicable, that I'd somehow landed a live-in household management position with the mysterious client whose floors I'd been scrubbing. "This sounds insane," Jenna said flatly. "You collapsed? And now you're moving into his mansion?" "Ro, this is how horror movies start." "It's not like that," I protested, though I wasn't entirely sure what it was like. "He's been nothing but respectful. And he paid off Mom's medical debt." Silence on the other end. Then, "He what?" "All of it. Every cent. Mom's treatment can continue without any financial stress." "Oh my God." Jenna's voice softened. "Okay, that's incredible. But still, promise me you'll check in every day, and if anything feels wrong." "I'll leave immediately," I assured her, though the promise felt hollow. Where would I go? Back to juggling multiple jobs and drowning in debt? Back to the apartment I could barely afford? No, this was my chance at something better, even if I didn't fully understand the cost yet. That evening, Caspian emerged from his offices for dinner. Elena had prepared something elaborate: roasted chicken with herbs I couldn't identify, vegetables that looked like art, bread still warm from the oven. We ate in the smaller dining room, just the two of us at a table that could seat 8. "Tell me about your mother," Caspian said, cutting into his chicken with precise movements. "Beyond the medical situation." The request surprised me. "Why?" "Because she matters to you, which means I should know about her." So I told him. About Mom's career as a teacher before the illness forced her retirement. About her love of terrible romance novels and competitive baking shows. About how she'd raised me alone after my father left when I was 3, working multiple jobs to give me opportunities she'd never had. "She sounds strong," Caspian observed. "She is. But even strong people break under enough pressure." "Yes." Something dark flickered across his face. "They do." We lapsed into comfortable silence, and I found myself studying him. The way he held his fork with careful precision. The slight tension in his shoulders that never fully released. The way his eyes constantly scanned the room, even in his own home, as if assessing threats. "What happened to your mother?" I asked quietly. "After the stroke." He was still for a long moment. Then, "She lived for 5 more years, but she was never the same. The vibrant, determined woman who'd raised me alone was gone, replaced by someone fragile and confused. I was 17 when she finally passed." "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." His voice was flat. "It taught me everything I needed to know about the world. That being good and working hard means nothing if you don't have power. That people will take everything from you if you let them. That the only way to protect what matters is to be stronger, richer, more ruthless than everyone else." The bitterness in his words painted a picture of the boy he'd been. Angry, grieving, determined to never be powerless again. Whatever path he'd taken from that grief to this mansion, it had been dark and probably violent. "Is that why you do what you do?" I asked. "Whatever it is?" "Partially." He set down his fork, his gray eyes meeting mine. "I told you I handle acquisitions. That's true, in a sense. I acquire things for people who can't acquire them through legal means. Information, leverage, solutions to problems that require discretion. So you're a fixer, among other things." He leaned back in his chair. "I also manage territories, settle disputes, and ensure certain business operations run smoothly. I'm what's called a mediator in my world. Someone trusted by all sides to find solutions that don't end in bloodshed. But sometimes they do," I said. "End in bloodshed." "Sometimes," No apology, no justification. But less than would occur without me. I should have been horrified, should have pushed back from the table and demanded he return me to my old life immediately. Instead, I found myself nodding, understanding in some fundamental way that this was who he was. Not a monster, but a man who'd chosen a dark path for reasons that made sense to him. "The meeting you canceled," I said. "What happened because you weren't there?" Caspian's expression grew distant. A rival organization tried to move into territory I'd claimed. 3 of my people were injured in the confrontation. It could have been prevented if I'd been there to negotiate. Guilt flashed through me. Because of me? No. His voice was sharp. Because they saw an opportunity and took it. That's on them, not you. And it's been handled. Handled how? Do you really want to know? I thought about it, about the implications of whatever violent solution he'd implemented. No, I admitted. I don't think I do. Good instincts. He stood, gathering his plate. You don't need to know the details of my business, Rowan. What you need to know is that this house is safe, that you're safe, and that I'll do whatever's necessary to keep it that way. As he moved to leave, I called after him again. Caspian, those people who were injured, are they okay? He paused at the doorway, looking back with an expression I couldn't read. They will be. I take care of my own. The words hung in the air between us, weighted with meaning. Because that's what I was now, wasn't I? His. Under his protection. In his home. Part of his carefully controlled world. And despite everything, the danger, the violence lurking at the edges, the complicated morality of it all, I found I didn't want to leave. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Elena trained me on the household systems, complex spreadsheets tracking everything from wine inventory to maintenance schedules. I learned the preferences of the small, discreet staff who came and went like ghosts. I discovered that Caspian had a standing weekly appointment with his tailor, that he took his coffee black with 1 sugar in the morning, but espresso in the afternoon, that he ran 5 miles every morning at dawn, regardless of weather. I learned to read his moods from subtle cues, the tightness around his eyes when business was stressful, the way his hand would curl into a fist when someone on the phone displeased him, the rare, genuine smile that transformed his face when something actually amused him. And he learned me, too. Knew without being told that I checked on Mom every morning and evening, that I preferred tea to coffee, that I'd developed a habit of reading in the library late at night when sleep eluded me, that the sound of raised voices made me flinch, a remnant of my father's unpredictable temper. We fell into an unexpected ease with each other, sharing meals and conversations that ranged from mundane household matters to surprisingly deep philosophical discussions. He was brilliant, I discovered, educated in ways that went far beyond formal schooling, with insights into human nature that came from years of studying people as tools or threats. You analyze everyone. I observed one evening as we sat in the library, me curled in an armchair with a book while he reviewed documents at the desk. He looked up, one eyebrow raised. Occupational hazard. Do you analyze me? Constantly. No hesitation, no apology. You're a puzzle I'm still solving. What have you figured out so far? He set down his pen, giving me his full attention. That you're stronger than you look. That you process the world through patterns and details most people miss. That you're afraid of depending on anyone because everyone you've depended on has either left or needed you to be the strong one. That you're lonely, but don't admit it, even to yourself. The accuracy made my chest tight. That's unsettling. Truth usually is. He stood, crossing to my chair. What have you figured out about me? I looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd become my employer, my protector, my friend. That you're terrified of caring about anyone because everyone you've cared about has either died or betrayed you. That you control everything because chaos took your mother from you. That you're lonely too, but you've built walls so high you've forgotten how to let anyone in. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or recognition. He crouched beside my chair, bringing us eye level. You see too much. So do you. We stayed like that for a long moment, the air between us charged with something neither of us acknowledged. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the spell. He stood smoothly, checking the message with a frown. I have to go out, he said. Business that can't wait. Be careful, I said automatically, then felt foolish. What did I know about his business? But he smiled, genuine warmth in the expression. Always am. It was past midnight when shouting woke me. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, trying to orient myself. The voices were coming from downstairs. Caspian's, I recognized, and at least 2 others. Not the measured tones of normal conversation, but real anger, raw and sharp. I shouldn't go down. It wasn't my business. But worry propelled me out of bed and into the hallway, following the sound to the main foyer. Caspian stood in the center of the marble floor, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. His white shirt was partially untucked, specked with something dark that might have been blood. His face was set in lines of cold fury as he faced off against a 3rd man, older, silver-haired, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed authority. You're making a mistake, Vale, the older man said, his accent Russian and thick. The treaty stands. You violated it by interfering in the waterfront situation. Petrov was moving drugs through civilian areas, Caspian replied, his voice deadly calm. Children's schools. That's a line no one crosses, treaty or not. That's not your concern. We police our own. Then police them better. Caspian stepped closer, and even from my position at the top of the stairs, I could feel the menace radiating from him. Or I'll continue doing it for you. The older man, the Russian boss clearly, noticed me then. His eyes flicked up to where I stood frozen on the stairs, then back to Caspian with something like amusement. I see. So that's why you've been distracted lately. A woman. He laughed, cold and mocking. How predictable. Caspian's hand moved to his hip, where I now noticed a gun tucked into his waistband. Leave her out of this. Why? She's leveraged now. Everyone knows the great Caspian Vale doesn't take women into his home. Doesn't let anyone matter. But this one. The Russian's smile was predatory. This one you're protecting. That makes her valuable. Terror seized me. I'd known abstractly that Caspian's world was dangerous, but seeing it manifest in front of me, seeing myself become a target simply by existing in his space, made it real in a way nothing else had. Mikhail. Caspian's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire foyer. You have 5 seconds to walk out of my home. If you or anyone from your organization comes near her, I will burn your empire to ash. Do you understand? The tension was suffocating. Mikhail's men shifted, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Caspian didn't move, but I saw his 2 guards tense, ready for violence. This isn't over, Mikhail finally said. You can't protect everyone, Vale. Eventually, something will slip. Get out. The Russians retreated, but not before Mikhail looked up at me one more time with a gaze that promised trouble. When the door finally closed behind them, Caspian's shoulders sagged infinitesimally before he caught himself. How much did you hear? He asked without turning around. Enough. I descended the stairs on shaking legs. You're bleeding. He glanced down at his shirt, as if only now noticing. Not my blood. There was an altercation before the meeting. An altercation. I reached him, saw the stress lines around his eyes, the exhaustion he was trying to hide. You could have been killed. I wasn't. He reached out, his hand cupping my face with surprising gentleness. And neither were you, that's what matters. He called me leverage, said I'm valuable because you're protecting me. He's trying to find weaknesses. That's what men like Mikhail do. But he's right, isn't he? I pulled back from his touch, sudden clarity cutting through my fear. I've become a liability, someone you have to worry about protecting. You're not a liability. His voice was firm. You're... What, Caspian? What am I? Because I thought I understood this arrangement. Thought I was just an employee, someone managing your household. But that's not what this is it? He didn't answer, just stared at me with those storm-gray eyes. You canceled that meeting because of me, I continued, the pieces finally clicking together. You've been checking on me constantly, making sure I'm safe. You paid off an impossible debt and brought me into your home not because you needed household help, but because... I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice what I was beginning to suspect. Because what? He prompted quietly. Because you care. The words hung between us, terrifying in their simplicity. You actually care about me. Yes? No hesitation, no deflection. I care. More than I should. More than is safe for either of us. The admission sucked the air from the room. I stared at him, this dangerous man who'd upended my life, trying to process what he was saying. Why? I whispered. Why me? He moved closer, his hand returning to my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. Because when I found you collapsed in my hallway, I saw something I thought I'd lost the capacity to feel. Protectiveness, connection. The desire to keep someone safe not out of obligation or strategy, but because the thought of harm coming to them is unbearable. That's insane, I breathed. You barely know me. I know enough. His other hand came up, framing my face between his palms. I know you're brave and stubborn and too selfless for your own good. I know you see the world in shades of gray when everyone else demands black and white. I know that when you laugh, really laugh, it's the best sound I've ever heard. And I know that somewhere between finding you unconscious and now, you became mine to protect. Not as property, not as leverage, as something infinitely more important. My heart hammered against my ribs. Caspian. I'm not asking you to feel the same, he interrupted. I'm just telling you the truth. You deserve that much. But the problem was, I did feel the same. Had been feeling it for weeks without acknowledging it. The way my pulse quickened when he entered a room, the warmth that flooded through me when he smiled at something I'd said, the sense of rightness when we sat together in comfortable silence. I'd fallen for the monster in the mansion, and he'd fallen for me too. This is complicated, I managed. Yes, and dangerous. Very. We should be sensible about this. Maintain professional boundaries. Probably. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I shivered. Are you going to be sensible, Rowan? No, I admitted. I don't think I am. He kissed me then, or maybe I kissed him. The details blurred in the intensity of the moment. His lips were surprisingly soft against mine. The kiss gentle, despite the violence he'd likely been part of hours earlier. One hand tangled in my hair while the other splayed across my lower back, pulling me closer until no space remained between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. This changes everything, he said. I know. You'll be a target now. Anyone wanting to hurt me will see you as the quickest path. I know that too. And you're staying anyway? I thought about my options. Could go back to my old life, back to drowning in debt and exhaustion. Could run somewhere new and hope Caspian's world never found me. Or I could stay here, in this dangerous man's orbit, and see where this terrifying connection led. Yes, I said simply. I'm staying. Relief and something darker, possession perhaps, flashed across his face. Then we do this properly. No more pretending you're just my employee. No more hiding what you mean to me. What do I mean to you? He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. Everything. You mean everything. The weeks that followed were a study in contrasts. During the days, I managed Caspian's household with growing confidence, navigating the complexities of his life with Elena's patient guidance. But the nights belonged to us. Stolen moments in the library, quiet conversations over late dinners, kisses that grew increasingly heated until one of us pulled back with shaking restraint. "We should take this slowly," Caspian said one evening. His hand splayed possessively across my lower back as we stood on the terrace overlooking the grounds. "You're still adjusting to this world." "I've been here almost 2 months," I pointed out. "At what point do I stop adjusting and start actually living?" His lips curved against my temple. "Patient, aren't you?" "Not particularly." I turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I've spent my entire adult life being patient, being careful, playing it safe. Look where it got me." "It got you here." His thumb traced my jawline. "With me." "Exactly. So, maybe reckless is working better than careful ever did." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I'd learned to treasure his real laughter, so different from the cold amusement he showed the outside world. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" "Probably." But despite the banter, there was a new tension between us. Not uncomfortable, but charged with awareness and anticipation. We both knew where this was heading. It was just a question of when. The decision was made for us on a Tuesday night. I was in my room, though I'd been spending less and less time there, gravitating toward whatever space Caspian occupied, when my phone rang. Mom's nurse, the night shift one whose voice I knew too well. "Miss Finch, your mother's asking for you. She's having a rough night, lots of confusion and agitation. I think it would help if you came by." Guilt twisted my stomach. I'd visited twice a week since moving in, but it never felt like enough. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. I was grabbing my coat when Caspian appeared in the hallway. "Where are you going?" "Hospital. Mom's having a bad night." His expression shifted immediately into protective concern. "I'll drive you." "You don't have to." "I'm driving you," he repeated firmly. No arguments. The drive to St. Vincent's was quiet, Caspian's hand finding mine in the darkness of the car. When we arrived, he insisted on accompanying me inside despite my protests. "I'm not letting you deal with this alone," was all he said. Mom was in bed, looking small and frail against the white sheets. Her eyes were confused when they found mine, and my heart broke a little. "Rowan?" Her voice was uncertain. "Is it really you?" "It's me, Mom." I took her hand, settling into the chair beside her bed. "I'm here." Her gaze drifted past me to Caspian, who'd hung back near the door. "Who's that?" "That's Caspian. He's my employer and my friend." "Friend." Mom's eyes sharpened with something of her old awareness. "He's very handsome. You should marry him." I felt heat flood my face. "Mom, I'm serious. Look at him, and the way he's looking at you." She smiled, the expression heartbreakingly familiar despite her current confusion. "That's the way your father used to look at me, before things went bad, like you were his whole world." I glanced back at Caspian, and found his gray eyes fixed on me, with an intensity that made my breath catch. My whole world. Was that really how he saw me? "Get some rest, Mom," I said gently, squeezing her hand. "I'll be back tomorrow." But she was already drifting off, the medications pulling her back under. I sat there for a long moment, watching her breathe, thinking about futures and possibilities and how quickly everything could change. She's right, you know. Caspian's voice came from behind me. About how I look at you. I turned to find him closer than I'd expected. Caspian, I love you, Rowan. The words were simple, declarative, impossible. I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably completely insane, but I love you. The world narrowed to just us, just this moment. You can't. And yet I do. He crouched beside my chair, taking my free hand in his. I've tried not to, tried to keep this professional and safe, but you've become essential to me in ways I can't even articulate. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing before I sleep. You make me want to be better than I am. Tears blurred my vision. I love you too. God help me. I love you too. His smile was blinding. Then let's stop fighting it. We left the hospital hand in hand, the decision made without words. Back at the mansion, Caspian led me not to my guest room but to his private suite, the space I'd seen only briefly during household inspections. Are you sure? He asked at the threshold, giving me one last chance to retreat. I answered by kissing him, pouring everything I couldn't say into the contact. His response was immediate and overwhelming, arms banding around me as he walked us backward into the room, kicking the door shut behind us. What followed was tender and intense, patient exploration punctuated by moments of desperate need. He learned every inch of my body with the same thorough attention he gave everything else, and I discovered the man beneath the dangerous exterior. Scarred, yes, but also capable of breathtaking gentleness. Afterward, we lay tangled together in his massive bed, my head on his chest, as his fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. About the work I do. I tensed slightly. Okay. I'm what's called a mediator in the criminal underworld. When territories conflict or when business dealings go wrong, I'm brought in to negotiate solutions. I have connections to most of the major organizations in the city: Russian, Italian, Irish, Chinese. They trust me because I have no loyalty to any single family. That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, but it also means I have significant power. Enough power to protect you from anything. I propped myself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Is that why you do it? For the power? Initially, yes. After my mother died, I was angry and lost. I fell in with people who taught me how to turn that anger into influence. By the time I was 25, I'd made myself indispensable to the city's criminal infrastructure. He paused. But lately, I've been thinking about exit strategies. Because of me? Partially. Also because I'm tired, Rowan. Tired of the violence, the constant vigilance, the moral compromises. I have enough money to last several lifetimes. Maybe it's time to actually live one. Hope fluttered in my chest. What would that look like? Legitimate business investments, consulting work that doesn't involve death threats, a quiet life with the woman I love. His hand cupped my face. If she'll have me. Always, I whispered. But Caspian, can you really walk away from that world? Won't they try to stop you? They'll try. But I have leverage. Information, connections, debts owed. And I'm very good at negotiation. His smile was sharp. They'll let me go because it's in their best interest to let me go. And because the alternative is war, and I've spent 15 years making myself too valuable to kill. It should have terrified me, this casual discussion of violence and criminal politics. Instead, I found myself trusting his confidence, believing that this dangerous man could somehow navigate us both to safety. How long? I asked. How long until you're free? 6 months, maybe a year. I need to carefully transfer my responsibilities, settle outstanding obligations, and ensure no power vacuums that could trigger violence. He pulled me back down against his chest. But I'll do it. For you, for us, I'll find a way out. Over the following months, I watched Caspian systematically dismantle his position in the criminal underworld. It was like watching a grandmaster play chess. Every move calculated 10 steps ahead. He mediated a major territorial dispute between the Russians and Italians, his final act ensuring peace that would last years. He sold several of his underground businesses to rivals at prices that left everyone feeling they'd gotten a good deal. He transferred his information networks to a protege he'd been quietly training, and through it all, he kept me safe. When threats emerged, and they did, because Mikhail hadn't forgotten his promise, Caspian handled them with ruthless efficiency. I never asked for details, didn't want to know. But the threats always disappeared, and we remained untouched in our mansion sanctuary. Mom's health improved dramatically with the consistent, high-quality care she was now receiving. She even regained enough clarity to properly meet Caspian, declaring him dangerous but devoted, with typical directness. "He'll burn the world down for you," she told me during one visit. "Make sure you're worth it." "I'm trying," I said. "You already are, sweetheart. You already are." It was a spring evening, nearly a year after I'd first collapsed in Caspian's hallway, when everything finally came together. We were in the library, him working through final documents while I read nearby, when he suddenly closed his laptop with decisive finality. "It's done," he said. I looked up. "What's done?" "All of it. My obligations, my responsibilities, my involvement in that world. As of today, I'm officially retired from the mediation business." He stood, crossing to my chair. "I'm free, Rowan. We're free." Joy and disbelief warred in my chest. "Really? Completely?" "Completely. I've transferred my last contract, settled my final account. The only business I'm involved in now is entirely legitimate." He knelt beside my chair, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Which means I can finally ask you this properly." My breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a ring, elegant, understated, with a single diamond that caught the lamplight. "Rowan Finch, you walked into my life when I'd forgotten how to feel anything but anger and control. You saw past the danger to something worth saving. You made me want to be better, to build something real instead of just accumulating power." His voice was steady, but I could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "Yes. God, yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, then pulled me from the chair into his arms, kissing me with a passion that still made my knees weak after all these months. "I love you," he murmured against my lips. "My reckless, stubborn, perfect girl." "I love you too," I replied. "My dangerous, reformed, surprisingly romantic man." He laughed, and the sound filled the library like music. Outside, evening was falling, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in the city, the criminal underworld was adjusting to life without Caspian Vale's mediation. But here, in this mansion that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home, we were building something new. A life, a future, a love that had emerged from the most unlikely circumstances. "What do you want?" Caspian asked, holding me close. "Big wedding? Small ceremony? Something in between?" "I just want you," I said honestly. "Everything else is details." "Then you'll have me. For as long as you'll keep me." "That's going to be a very long time," I warned. "Good." He kissed my forehead. "Because I'm not going anywhere. I stopped a war for you, Rowan. Walked away from everything I'd built. You're stuck with me now." I can live with that. And I could, because the man who'd found me unconscious on his hallway floor, who'd knelt beside me when he'd never knelt for anyone, who'd dismantled his dangerous empire piece by piece to build a safe life for us. That man was mine, and I was his, not as leverage or possession, but as an equal partner in a love that had transformed us both. The Mafia Boss had stopped his war for the maid who'd collapsed in his home, and in doing so, he'd found something far more valuable than power or control. He'd found redemption, found peace, found home, and so had I.